It's really weird that Manuel hasn't been around for a couple days.
Days? Shade, I think you mean months. Man has been missing for 2 months.
But he is right. It's strange for Manuel to disappear all of a sudden. Is this the place geek?
Yeah, it says so in this weirdly convenient map to Manuel's house that I found in the mail this morning.
If you say so.
Doesn't it feel weird to be breaking into his house like this?
Nah.
I think I found his room.
Hey, what's that on the floor?
It says, play me.
Spider-Man PS4 was released on September 7th, 2018. The game received praise for its narrative, characterization, combat, and web-slinging traversal mechanics. Although some people did criticize its open-world design for lacking innovation, a number of reviewers called it one of the best superhero games ever, some even comparing it to the Batman Arkham series. It became one of the fastest-selling games of the year, one of the best-selling PS4 games of all time, and the fastest-selling superhero game of the United States. Now, the way I found out about this game was back in 2017 when I saw a teaser on TV, and even saw some Let's Players do walkthroughs of the game, but I wasn't really interested in it. This was back in the era whenever I saw a game that had an already existing franchise, that it wasn't a game, would be nothing but a cash grab. But then again, I used to be one of those annoying kids who actually liked Call of Duty Ghosts, so my opinions back then were objectively wrong. Then comes the year 2019, where I experienced something interesting in my life, and after a couple months later after that interesting thing happened, my mom decided to buy me a PS4 with one game, and I was split between 2 games, those being Spider-Man PS4 or Bendy and the Ink Machine. And if you know me, you know what I picked. The one that isn't a complete dumpster fire. So after the exact day, I installed Spider-Man PS4 and played it, and my god, those first 10 minutes of playing it felt like magic, and I knew I was in for one hell of a ride. So after 5 days, I was able to 100% this game, and in that final cutscene, I was left speechless. So let's not waste any more time and explain why this game is one of my favorite pieces of media ever. Yeah, I think it's no surprise that this game is nothing but breathtaking, and I'm confident to say that this is by far the best looking game I've ever played. Spider-Man's gameplay when swinging is viewed from a third-person distance, so it gives you time to look and appreciate the city surrounding you, which practically looks photorealistic, which really says a lot since games like The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 came out, and in the same console generation as Spider-Man PS4, and comparing them both in gameplay and visuals is like comparing apples to oranges. Every little detail that comes with the visuals of New York City are incredible. Every building building, every car, every citizen, and every nook and cranny makes New York feel more alive than anything, to the point that it can be considered its own character in the story. The lighting in this game cannot be praised enough. When it comes to the middle of the day, it looks great, but it becomes perfection when we reach nighttime. When it comes night, it makes New York seem lively, and lightings imparted Times Square and parks really says something to appreciate in the level of detail. In Times Square, it's bright and colorful, while in the parks, it's semi-lit and makes it look more dark, like an actual park would be. Rain is also a weather type in this game, and while rain isn't personally my favorite, the rain in this game is oddly calming and makes for a gloomy yet relaxing experience. The times of day definitely play a part in why this game has amazing visuals, and one complaint some people had is that there wasn't an option to switch times of the day. Luckily, in a later update, Insomniac did add this feature, and I'm glad they did. Speaking of New York, in Act 2, where you see the city become more infested with criminals, demons, and sable agents becoming integrated into parts of New York, and whenever you can complete a mission or fight them in a warehouse battle, they slowly stop becoming parts of the city, and their bases will be gone, and that's such a neat detail. Cutscenes are always presented in a very nicely manner, with amazing lighting, editing, and great use of slow-mo that knows to when to be used, and it impresses me how beautiful everything looks even after 4 years. 4 years, Jesus. Cutscenes are the perfect time to also show off the incredible voice performances of this game, with each actor giving it their best and doing a spectacular job at it. Especially Yuri Doendahl as Spider-Man and William Soldiers as Doc are my personal favorites, because it displays how well the characters are written, but I'll talk about them when the time comes. But this is a superhero game, for God's sakes. Where's the action? Well, this game provides action so cool that it makes every other superhero game tremble in fear. The set pieces of this game are a perfect representation of everything I love about this game. The quick gameplay, incredible visuals are really something else, and makes the scenes that they're in unforgettable. But that's enough of New York. Let's talk about one of my favorite collectibles of this game, the spider suits. They look breathtaking and distinct to one another, whether that's from materials or even having distinct art styles. No suit looks the same to another, and that's the level of dedication is incredible. So yeah, it's no surprise that I love this game's visuals and really have no major criticism or nitpick with it. But that's only half of the game's technical aspects, because what's a game without its, well, gameplay? Alright, so we already got through how pretty this game looks, but does it play as well as it looks? Well, let's start with what you do most in this game. Traversal. Traversal in this game is one of those things that most casual players can pick up and play, while most experienced players can spend most of their time mastering the art of web slinging. Each feeling of each swing feels amazing with it, also accompanied with one of those incredible swinging animations. Even later in the game, it gives you the ability of doing tricks mid-air, which were not necessarily my favorite thing to do, but it's a neat detail nonetheless. The way you gain speed and momentum in this game is also pretty cool. Of course, you can do the starting jump and start swinging, but my favorite thing to do to gain momentum is to go up a tall building and do a dive, which gives you more speed the higher the building you fall, and that's such a cool way to do it. Diving itself isn't perfect. Sometimes when I try to do a swing, it fails and it makes me fall down to the floor. It didn't happen to be too much, but when it did happen, it kind of became a problem. But I overall enjoyed the web slinging because of how fun it felt. Sometimes I just avoid doing missions to just fuck around and do tricks, and I never do that in the game unless if the gameplay is that fun. Web slinging in this game is the only way to travel. There's also wall running, which is smooth and fast, and they even added the ability to web jump out of fire escapes, which is a cool attention to detail that would have been fine if they didn't add it, but it makes the experience a whole lot better. Not only that, but you can also even web into specific objects in the city while doing special animations, which immerses you into the world more. And then there's also fast travel, which is kind of boring, which I just kind of not used. I just mainly swinged, but that's just kind of... I mean, if you don't like web slinging, then why the fuck did you buy a Spider-Man game? But that's only half of the gameplay. There's also combat, which was the thing that kind of worried me heading into this game, since it did remind me a lot of the Arkham games' combat. And although it is that to an extent, this game is a true Spider-Man combat experience. Spider-Man's combat feels fairly weak. Now, this might seem like a downside, but honestly, it's intentional. Even with it being an experienced Spider-Man, he is still pretty weak, so you have to focus on dodging and using his gadgets. Dodging is the key factor to landing powerful punches to your enemies and to avoid their attacks. And holy crap, they feel buttery smooth. As for the gadgets, other than the normal webs plus also the little spider drone, I never really used any others since I never found them to be that useful. They were still pretty fun nonetheless. This is just scraping the surface down to the combat. You can web up enemies and stick them to the wall or throw them at the other enemies. You can chuck them into the air to gain more mobility and attacks. You can grab objects into the background and attack enemies with them, and so much more, especially with the crazy shit experienced players can do, which I wish I would do. The variety of enemies is also something to admire. Of course, we have normal enemies, the enemies with guns and rocket launchers, brute enemies, but throughout the game we get variation of those enemies with completely unique attacks like the inner demon brute and or shielder that can make giant blasts into the ground, and even new enemies like the inner demon swordsman who are pretty damn hard to dodge at time. But the most satisfying thing to pull off in the combat is the finishers, which can be done with the focus meter. The focus meter has two capable abilities. You can either one-hit kill enemies, but you can also regain your health whenever you need it, which is a good system, and I find it way better than to heal after killing enemies. It really does make you feel like Spider-Man. I hate this catchphrase so much. But to put it simply, this game has a pretty complex gameplay, and the way I might put it seemed like it might be complicated to play, but it really isn't. And sure, it might feel a tad weird, but other than that, you might feel a bit comfortable with the combat. However, combat isn't the only thing you'll be doing in this game. I've talked about the main things we'll be doing in this game, and for this to be an open world experience, it does have to be a bit of side content, right? That's correct. There's stuff like collecting backpacks, going to villain warehouses to take them down, Taskmaster challenges, Black Cat toy finding things, research stations for Harry Osborn, landmark challenges, main side mission challenges, and tracking and collecting pigeons. Pigeons! Some people might say that these are nothing but repetitive objectives to make the game longer, and while that's the case at times, I just sort of ignore it because of how fun they are. Start out with the backpacks. Backpacks are collectibles you can get throughout the game with fun little Easter eggs for Spider-Man fans to find. They're also used to get the homemade skin from Homecoming, and that's such a cool addition that actually gives the incentive to continue finding the backpacks. Black Cat stakeouts are shorter since they do appear mid-game. They are pretty nice, and the reason for having the best Spider-Man suit in the game, don't at me. Pigeons are fun because they can at least give you a good test of your swinging and parkour abilities in the game so far. If I had one least favorite, I would definitely say the landmark missions. I mean, it's cool to take photos of places of the game, but it really isn't that interesting. That, and there's already photo mode, so you can already do that, but like, whatever. For the main side missions of the game, hideout or warehouse missions are missions where you have to take out a specific wave of enemies, whether they're normal criminals or inner demons. They're fun, and they can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, especially with the side objectives you can do while doing a specific attack or stuff. Research stations are pretty interesting. Harry Osborn has left some recordings or tasks for you to do since he's away in Europe, while giving you context of what the task is. The missions are honestly entertaining and fun at times, especially with the variety in content. Sometimes you have to web some fires in a building, or pass through a cloud of smog. These are nothing special, but for what they are pretty fun. We have the Taskmaster challenges, which vary in 4 possible missions: stealth, combat, swinging, and bomb defusing, which use them having a level of completion how well you do in the mission. And man, they're difficult as hell. But I like the challenge, although the combat sections are definitely my least favorites. After a couple of missions done, you get a boss fight against the Taskmaster, who might seem hard at first glance, but really is just a reskin version of the inner demon swordsman that can counter your finishers. But out of all of them, my least favorite side missions come from the lab and the puzzle minigames. Basically, there are 2 types of puzzles, a pipe puzzle and a spectrograph puzzle, which both of them I did not enjoy. The pipe puzzle is definitely my least favorite out of the 2. The best way I could describe them is just a no time limit version of the hacking puzzles from Bioshock, but surprisingly more dull. And the spectrograph puzzle just fill in the blank spaces in the right spaces. Sometimes you might need to add some together, plus even cancel them when there's a certain space that needs to be deleted. Ooh, so fun. My biggest problem with these missions is that they're not really fun or challenging enough to be interesting, but they really don't matter since you can always skip them. Why the fuck was this added? Overall, the side missions are pretty good. Nothing super original, but it's not trying to be. It focuses on being fun, and for the most part, they are. Alright, I guess it's time for me to talk about the elephant regarding this game. You guys, I have something to confess. I don't actually hate the Mary Jane and Miles Morales stealth segments of Spider-Man PS4. Yeah, I know what I said. The biggest critique I've seen with this game are specifically these segments, with people calling them useless gameplay segments that slow down the pace that can be easily written off the game. And to that I have to say, yeah, they kind of have a point. Listen, I know the segment's called In Defense of the Mary Jane Miles Morales segments, but I'm sure as hell not going to be the last person to say this. But these segments aren't perfect, like, at all. Most of them at the time, they just feel pretty damn long, when they should feel tense. That and the dialogue in these are really that good. With that being said, however, these segments do have some good elements to them. First and foremost, story-wise, they're pretty important. For Mary Jane, it focuses on she made it to the museum with the inner demons, starting to investigate Tombstone's plan, and found the place where they would start Devil's Breath, with Miles being even more important, with experiencing the death of his father and getting medicine after Devil's Breath started. So saying that these segments are useless is kinda dumb and doesn't really make sense. As for the gameplay itself, I like how small and vulnerable the characters feel during the segments. Unlike Spider-Man, MJ and Miles don't have superpowers. Well, in the case of Miles, not yet, so you have to rely on stealth. This is perfectly shown in the Rhino and Miles segments, which feels straight out of something from a horror movie like It. Other than the final MJ level, I didn't enjoy any of her levels, rather I found them to be pretty tedious, but for Miles, I practically enjoyed every single small gameplay change they added for him. Overall, I understand why people might not like this segment, since it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but they aren't terrible enough for the point to be ruining the game. And with that, I covered every single technical and gameplay aspect of the story. From now on, I'll be focusing on the main part, and my favorite part about this game, the story. Well, more specifically, the characters, how they're integrated into the story. And there's no better way to start than talking about the main man himself. I don't think this is a controversial opinion, and if it is, I don't care, but this game might have one of the best representations of both Spider-Man and Peter Parker I've seen done in media. First of all, the game doesn't bullshit with you in the start. It's not an origin story or even shows us Uncle Ben's death. We have a 24-year-old Peter plus an already experienced Spider-Man who has been doing this shit for over 8 years, and it drops us right into the action and the start of his story. The first thing you see in the game is a bunch of things that Peter has archived over the years of him being Spider-Man. It complements the type of Peter Parker we have in this story. He's no longer a teenager anymore. He's an adult who deals with his consequences and even gets kicked out of his own apartment for having the responsibility of being Spider-Man. It's shown beautifully in the introduction scene to the game, where Peter has to make a decision to whether pay his rent or go to Fisk Tower and stop Kingpin. He is so focused on his life being Spider-Man, he slowly but surely stops focusing on his own life, and the game does an incredible job showing you the impact of these type of decisions he makes. His characterization is even more perfect with the voice actor Jerry Lowenthal getting at his best. To me at least, Lowenthal is definitely my definitive Spider-Man voice actor. His voice has the charm and snappiness the character himself has. Even when things get dark or get emotional, you can still hear Peter Parker. Speaking of his charm, I love how charming he was written in this game and how he acts with the people around him. His interactions with Yuri Watanabe always bring a smile to my face. And man, I love the way they integrated Peter and MJ's relationship. When we first see her, it's stated that she started dating Peter in the senior year of college, and they dated for about 2 years, but eventually MJ broke up with Peter due to him being overprotective. Once they cross paths once again, she offers to work with Spider-Man to investigate the rise of crime in New York. As their work brings the duos together once again, the two struggle with them defining their relationship romantically and as a crime-fighting duo. But 3 months after the conclusion of the game, they rekindle their relationships after MJ invites Peter to stay with her while his new home is being refurbished. And that's what I love about their chemistry in this game. They don't start loving each other once again when they see each other again. It's not an overnight thing. It happens gradually, and that's what makes these characters feel human. I also love the relationship he has with Aunt May, and how much he cares about her, how much she cares about him. At the end of the mission where you see Peter get evicted, he stays in the workplace feast to sleep, and then we see Aunt May offering to give Peter money to help him with his rent, which leads to Peter refusing and May insisting. They both clearly care about each other, which makes their death at the end of the game even more impactful. There's also the start of the mentorship with Miles, which is done expertly here. When Peter sees Miles in danger, he saves them, and then he gives him tips in self-defense, which he later uses after the Rhino level. His mentorship is built upon in the 3-part The City That Never Sleeps, but it's done even better in Spider-Man Miles Morales. Insomniac's biggest task for this game was to make Peter Parker / Spider-Man a good character, since Spider-Man himself is the most relatable superhero of all time for a reason. And like this segment is called, I think Insomniac went above and beyond to make this one of the best interpretations of Peter Parker and Spider-Man I've ever seen. But you know what they say, with every good hero comes even better villains. And let me tell you, this game delivers 6 incredible villains, with 4 of them subverting my expectations. Yeah, that's what we're calling this segment. Now, this group of 6 Sinister people was led by Doc Ock. The group consists of Mr. Negative, Electro, Vulture, Rhino, and Scorpion, which was formed in an attempt to take revenge on his former business partner, Norman Osborn. Now, this segment will mainly consist on Electro, Vulture, Rhino, and Scorpion, since I feel like Mr. Negative and Doc Ock need their own segments. So for this segment, I'll just split it into mini segments to describe my thoughts on each member. Also, take a shot with many times I've said segment in this segment. Please kill me. Which is the first member we see of the Sinister Six, and he's honestly my favorite, just because of how calm yet thrill-seeking he is, to the point where he actually goes along with Spidey's banter, which is unlike any other version of Electro I've ever seen in media, who's basically just Benson from regular show if he had superpowers. I love this man's design. He even has a star-shaped scar in his face, which is a cool little nod to his traditional mask in the comics, but other than that, he has a more simple design to the rest of the Sinister Six. And honestly, it's definitely the most visually appealing design, really. His voice actor is Josh Keaton, and I think he does a really well job here. My only problem here is his motivation. Electro wants to become pure living energy, which I guess sort of fits his character, but like another villain, it's not really that interesting. But other than that, Electro's pretty awesome. Vulture's probably my least favorite villain out of the Sinister Six, but I still like the way they integrated him. His design is threatening and honestly really cool looking. To an extent, it reminds me of the MCU Vulture. My biggest problem with him, though, is that he isn't integrated as the rest of the villains, which is a shame, because the times when he does appear, with Spidey and Electro, they are pretty entertaining, and his motivations are really weird if you think about it. Okay, so basically, Vulture has spinal cancer because of his wings, and Doc Ock has a cure for him if he kills Spider-Man. But then he fails. So, like, does he die from cancer then? I don't know, that just seems kind of weirdly morbid. But I kind of feel bad for him, shit. But even though I think his potential was greatly missed, I think he's still pretty enjoyable. And we have Rhino, which I think he's pretty cool. I love his motivation of him running to relieve his Rhino suit and Otto giving them a chance to leave, but he has to kill Spider-Man for that to happen. His design is also pretty good, I guess. But my favorite thing about him is his personality. Man is threatening as all hell, but he's fucking stupid. But you know, the good type of fucking stupid. It makes his banter with Scorpion in their boss fight a whole lot better. Other than that, there's not that much to say. His character's more fleshed out than Miles Morales. So we'll get back to him when the time comes. Finally, we have Scorpion. You see, Scorpion is a sadistic piece of shit that cares for no one but himself. And he'll do whatever he wants to get what he wants. And that's why he's amazing. Man has a top-notch design, and his personality is entertaining. Man's just an asshole, and I'm so glad they paired him up with Rhino, since their personalities are polar opposites, which leads to them having some really funny banter between them both and their boss.
So you guys in Octavius, huh? You have a name yet? The Scary Six? The Dirty Half Dozen? How about the We Murdered Spider-Man and used his corpse for a blanket? Hey, Darkin, please, you embarrass yourself.
Even without Rhino, Scorpion is still a threatening antagonist, especially with the way he screws over Peter with that toxin level. Overall, I have to admit that Insomniac did subvert my expectations how much I enjoyed seeing these villains, but this game managed to do them justice. However, I only talked about 4 out of the 6 members. Let's talk about one of the most negative out of that group, but first I need to make a phone call. Hey yo, Tim? Remember that project I was telling you about?
Yeah, I remember. I ain't finna do that shit. Is Manuel D even your real name? Man, get off my phone. Alright, now that this Pixar video is out, I can finally relax. How did I get here? Alright, since I got a review on my channel, I'll keep this brief. I want to talk about the goated villain himself, Mr. Negative. Originating from a failed experiment from Otto Octavius and Norman Osborn, which you quickly understand why Martin Lee is upset, because not only did he get powers that he didn't ask for, it also killed his parents, which leads to multiple rallies being shut down due to the demons. Even when he joins the Sinister Six, he never loses sight of his main goal. Martin Lee has a compelling backstory, and his boss fights are too cold. Got my man Peter fighting a literal monster. Overall, Mr. Negative is a cool villain. He's also one of my favorite boss fights in the game. Definitely goated. Can I go now? I don't even know what a Manuel D is.
Hey, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Watch my Pixar video when you get the chance, alright? Alright, have a good night.
Alright, so we only got one more villain to talk about, and if you've been paying attention to this video, you know I've been missing to talk about one specific villain in this game, and let me tell you, this one hurts. Dr. Octopus is one of the best characters in this game, and I'm confident enough to say that this just might be the best iteration of the character I've ever seen. And this is from a guy whose favorite superhero movie is Spider-Man 2. So when I say this, you know I mean it. Said very on in the game that Norman Osborn had a pretty big vendetta against Otto, and Otto had a pretty big vendetta against him, because back then they used to be business partners, but after Otto figured out what Norman does in reality, they decided to break up. We first see Otto after dealing with Kingpin, with Otto trying to work out some things with his plans for a prosthetic to help people missing limbs. But then it leads to an incident puts Octavius Industries in thin ice with the city's safety committee. Later revealed that Octavius Industries is relying on grants for income from the city, but then it gets revealed by Major Osborn, which later Otto tells Peter to start looking for a new job, but Peter insists to keep working with him. Later, Otto reveals that he is suffering from a degenerative neurological disorder, probably caused by the exposure to toxic chemicals during his youth, without breakthrough in the science or processes and how to directly face them interference with his brain. He will eventually lose nearly all motor functions. Middle of Act 2, Otto finally makes his arms, which later Peter figures out that the interference present is at risk at altering the user's mood and personality drastically if left unchecked, and manages to convince Otto to keep working on the prototype, but after seeing Norman Osborn on TV, man got really angry, and then it leads to the birth of Doc Ock, where he teams up with the Sinister Six in order to team up and pretty much take down Norman Osborn and kill him. First of all, I love the way Otto is portrayed in this game. In the beginning of the game, Otto is a kind man who's passionate about changing the world for the better. He's always optimistic, even when projects often don't work, because he can learn from those mistakes. It's also mad smart, so that Peter can actually, admire him, yet he maintains a humble demeanor, admiring Peter's knack for impromptu science and describing the boy as a genius in his own right. However, as the game progresses, Otto begins acting frantically, his patience wilders, and he feels closer to getting his goals, and as the minigames reveal, Otto designs have some overlooked flaws that Peter regularly has to address and correct. Additionally, Otto has been increasing of the years of oppression by Norman, increasingly rise to the surface, culminating in his transformation into Dr. Octopus. What I love most about Otto is that the man gets a character arc. He feels like a great villain because you also get to see him as a good guy. His relationship with Peter and his role as his mentor is easy to buy because of the excellent dynamic the two characters share. Otto has a respect towards Peter, and Peter is inspired by Otto. Many people, when they saw Otto, knew he was going to turn into Darkhawk, and Imsoniac knew this and made their relationship the best written thing in this game, which makes their final battle even more impactful. Even though I think that the second Mr. Negative battle fits more as a final boss, Darkhawk's focuses on being more of an emotional battle than anything. Peter's revelation that Dr. Octopus knew about his secret identity all along, the latter veiled threat about hearing his identity goes wrong with him, how emotionally crushed Peter was when he heard that his friend and mentor knew who he truly was. The way Peter says, "You knew," perfectly shows how awful he feels. After all the elements and more add up to a delivery of a finale that's incredible, emotionally weighted, and feels like a worthy conclusion on a personal level. And the final scene between them both is perfection. Describing this scene won't do it justice.
Peter, I saw you as a son. I should have known you'd turn on me, just like all the others.
Turn? I've worshipped you, your mind, your conscience, wanting to help others, the way you never gave up.
That's because men like us have a duty, a responsibility, to use our talents in the service of others. Even if they don't appreciate it, we have to do what's best for those beneath us, whether they understand it or not.
No, you're wrong! You are everything I wanted to be! You just threw it away!
Yes, of course. You're right, Peter. Oh, I see that now. The neural interface affected my mind. But I can fix it. We can fix it. Together. If you'll help me.
do everything I can. I'll make sure you get the best help. No! If they put me away, they'll take my arms! I'll be trapped in this useless body! Please, Peter. That wasn't me. You said you'd never abandon me. You promised. Remember? And of course, you rest easy, knowing your secret is safe with me. You do what you think is best, Doc. It's all any of us can. Peter? Even when it hurts like hell. Peter, where are you going? Peter? Peter!
I see a lot of people saying that this scene following up after this makes them cry, but let me tell you, this one just makes me tear up all the time because of what it stands for. An ending relationship between a mentor and a student that never gave up on him no matter what until now. It fucking hurts. So, what now? Well, you've defeated the Sinister Six, successfully defeated Martin Lee and put a stop to Otto's plan, and got the anti-serum for Devil's Breath. One dose is left that can be multiplied to save more, or to save one person's life. In this case, much to our dismay and Peter's, that one person is Aunt May. This scene could have been a clusterfuck. It could have been one of those scenes where Peter gave her the serum, and then plot twist, there would have been more of the anti-serum, but Insomniac had the balls to actually kill off May, and to an extent, show the audience that the consequences of these games are real. We know that sooner or later she will die, and Peter deciding to let her go shows how much he has grown as a hero, and how much he upholds his responsibility. And what's even more heartbreaking is that in this scene, Peter has lost probably the most important person in his life, the person that helped him make Spider-Man, but for the opposite reasons. Uncle Ben dies because of Peter's lack of responsibility, while May dies because of Peter having too much responsibility, and her tombstone gets me to tear up with just one simple phrase. When you have enough responsibility to help someone, you help everyone. This fucking game, man. Fully, this game doesn't end on a depressing matter. Peter moves in with MJ and they officially become a couple again. Everyone is safe from Devil's Breath. Miles shows off his new spider powers to Peter. And a teaser for Spider-Man 2. And that was the base game of Spider-Man PS4. And saying that I loved it is a fucking understatement within itself. I'll talk about my overall thoughts about it at the conclusion segment of this video. But for now, let's talk about the DLC that was added to this game. That being the City That Never Sleeps, or as I like to call it,
Disappointment in the game of life.
DLC is a hard thing to talk about because of the many perspectives people have on them. You might like them since, they're adding new content to a game, but others think they should have been in the game since the start. And I'm mainly liking the content that was added new to the game, and I think that the 3-part DLC, The City That Never Sleeps, was an overall passable experience. Like the Sinister Six segments, I'll be focused on each part within their own little segments. So let's not waste any more time and talk about DLC 1, The Heist. Now this is a direct continuation after the main game. MJ tells Peter that there's a robbery in the art museum being robbed by Hammerhead's goons. After taking them down, doing some detective work, the other goons appear, which lets them use the museum as stealth. Even having a new vent system, which I wish was in the main game, since it would lead to some really creative puzzles, especially in places like the warehouse missions, which later get interrupted in a new way of combat, that being that there's enemies with an object, you have to let them exit, which isn't anything special, but definitely had tension. Speaking of new things added to the DLC, Bob the Disarming with a tiny spider bot. I fucking hate these segments, but you know what segments I didn't hate? Yeah, those where you find stolen hidden paintings from the original Black Cat, which gives you more backstory of what happened to him. It's interesting stuff. You know what's not interesting? Screwball challenges, and if you don't know who Screwball is, just imagine Alinity as a Spider-Man villain. But Screwball challenges were not fun in the slightest. They're just DLC replacements for the Taskmaster challenges, and they give me nothing but pain. But let's go back to the main show of this DLC. Black Cat. First of all, the chase that we have against her was the highlight of the DLC. The first half was pretty mediocre, but then it became awesome. Where I do think it could have been done a bit better. Hell, I would have loved to have a Black Cat boss fight after the chase, but what we do have is probably the best thing to come out of this DLC, which, to be honest, is just decent. It just kind of shows the quality of this DLC. For Felicia herself, she's probably the most underwhelming part of this entire DLC. At first, it might seem like she would have some depth, since she's saying that her son is captured by Hammerhead, and we have to, you know, take them down and whatnot. It makes the stakes higher because it might be Peter's son, as well as they have to team up to take the Magia down. But then, uh-oh, Black Cat was lying to you all along. I mean, I get that's the type of bullshit she would actually do, but the whole son storyline could have been something interesting to look into, but they decided to throw it away for something rather cliche. Oh yeah, and then she dies. Or so we think. Ooh. And that's the end of the heist, and I wasn't expecting much, and yet I'm still disappointed. The story was pretty okay for the most part. The characters was still great, although I was kind of disappointed by Black Cat. Side content would have done a bit better, and to think the best thing about this DLC was a slightly average chase. Not even the suits are that good, like what the fuck. If I were to rate it, I would give it a 5 out of 10, just slightly mediocre. I hope DLC 2, Turf Wars, is a bit better. And let me tell you, it kinda is. Turf War starts with Spider-Man and Yuri Watanabe going to infiltrate and take down Hammerhead and his goons, where they later get captured by Hammerhead, kills some police officers, and already the stakes are way higher than the heist, and it gives a new level of tension. After a sneak session with the Spider Bot that was pretty mid, we go to a warehouse mission, and yes, this is exactly what I needed! I'm honestly happy that there's new warehouse, since they do bring a new level of challenge. Plus, they're really fun. After that, there was an ambush and a building explodes, which absolutely breaks Yuri and goes to the place where we sneaked before with the Spider Bot, just to find out that Yuri killed all the thugs in the bar. We saved some civilians from buying from cement, and then we have a boss fight against Hammerhead? Let's go! Wait, he's actually really easy? Oh. After we defeat Hammerhead, Yuri shows up and shoots Hammerhead in the face, which this scene is a great representation of how Yuri became a noble police captain to a murderer, which I think is a build-up to her alter ego Wraith? I don't know. Also, Hammerhead isn't dead, and that was Turf Wars. A great improvement when compared to the heist, and it brings more engaging characters and story. Also, the suits are a big improvement, with my favorite being the OG Spider suit. The only problem I have is the lack of side missions, which are the notable things to the warehouse. Plus, Screwball is back. Yay! Overall, Turf War gets a 6 out of 10. But now we're in the finale, the silver lining. Oh boy. I wonder if it ended in a bang or a whimper. Well, there's only one way to find out. Well, it starts with Peter going to take down Hammerhead's goons, and then Silver Sable comes to the rescue. And I'm here realizing that I never talked about her in this video until now. She's a bitch. Anyway, she's going to kill Hammerhead's goons until you stop her, which leads to a boss fight against her, and man, that does not disappoint. I wanted to fight her since the base game, and this was satisfying with the battle, although I think it ended too early, which is a shame. But all in all, this was a great introduction to the DLC, by far my favorite. Then we go into a combo to the Silver Sable and start shooting at you while you try to fight cars, and it's such a cool addition. After a couple of missions, we see Hammerhead's new design, which kind of reminds me of Arkham Asylum's Titan Joker, I think his name is, but I don't remember. But when Hammerhead is about to kill Sable and Peter, it turns out that Black Cat is still alive. Wow, I never expected that, except I did. But only for her to show up, give Peter a hard drive about Hammerhead, and then she leaves and saying that they're even now. Man, I love character development. Then we find out that Hammerhead's weakness when we save Sable, and then we go to her secret base, which was there a lot, that was invisible. Who fucking wrote this? And then we have a good final boss fight against Hammerhead, with the final blow being badass. Then he dies. Then Sable thanks you, and then she leaves the city, which ends the city that never sleeps. Wow, that was interesting. I really don't know how to feel about this DLC. On one hand, I love the new enemies, and the visuals are awesome, but on the other hand, the story drops the ball, especially with the ending. Characters like Black Cat, my disliking towards Silver Sable just built up more with this DLC. So there's no, like, new side content other than the Screwball challenges, which kind of makes this the shortest DLC. Oh yeah, Screwball, we stop her, and it's kind of underwhelming. That's about it. Oh, is this the worst DLC out of them all? No, it's just worse than Turf Wars and slightly better than fucking The Heist. Overall, The City That Never Sleeps is a passable expansion of Spider-Man PS4. It isn't great to an extent, not even that good, with 1 out of the 3 DLCs actually being enjoyable, while the other 2 are just mediocre at best. For what they are, they're pretty okay for the most part. I wish they would have been a bit more entertaining, and even kind of tie up loose ends better, but for what they are, I just think they're okay at best. So, we're finished. I was finally able to script, record, and finish editing this video. But even after every bit of praise I've given this game in this probably long-ass video, I still think I haven't done it enough justice. I cannot praise this incredible job Imsoniac and the team surrounding this game did with this game. Spider-Man PS4 was one of my favorite pieces of media because of everything it stands for. Because of its incredible visuals, great gameplay, rich atmosphere and writing, and overall amazing everything. If you have a PS4 or PS5 and don't have this game, go get it. Like, you literally have no excuse to get it. And if you don't have a PS4 or PS5, go get it. It's so worth it to get this game. But seriously, Spider-Man PS4 is an experience I feel everybody needs to try out. Because at the end of the day, Imsoniac did prove themselves that Spider-Man can be something big, something exciting. It could be something greater.
Well, that was an interesting video.
But it didn't explain where the fuck Manuel is.
Guys, there's another CD in here. It says play me after the first CD. That said play me first, or else the CD won't make any sense.
Man, we should have played that one first.
Remember, Miles, you're Spider-Man. They really think they can get us, they checking the drip when I flip up the building. I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready to take on the world. You can't stop me now. I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. PlayStation.
What the hell does that mean?